participation. It is your constitutional right. Can I just request members and colleagues, when you join, if you can just, before you hit join, to just check that your mic is muted and also your video is off. We are on a public platform. Thank you. With that, we have a fairly lengthy agenda, members. We've got 13 items or so that will be discussed in an open platform, and then a further few items that will be discussed or governance reports that will be discussed in a closed meeting. Members, can I see by a show of hands if we can adopt the agenda as it is? Thank you, Mr. Mkiza. Thank you, Mr. Bukula. Thank you, Madam Massetti. Thank you, Advocate Sitole. We note that Madam Sbia has got a family emergency, an emergency that she's dealing with, and hence not going to be available today. Thank you. With that, members, we also have the declaration of interest forms that have been published on BoardPad. Kindly complete them. And that also applies to members of staff and management. If we can kindly complete them and return them to the Secretariat, please. But I don't know if there's any member that wants to declare anything verbally on any of the items that are before us. If there's any verbal declaration. If none, kindly just assist and complete those forms and return them to the Secretariat, please. With that, can we then go straight to agenda item number 5, Mr. Mabusa?
Thanks, Chair. Chair, this submission will be presented by Dorcas, but I'll just say maybe a few words before I hand over to Dorcas that this 2 farms that are being mentioned here, wind farms, are going through a feasibility assessment because of low and high voltage faults, and that is the reason why an exemption is actually applied for, according to Appendix 9 of the Grid Connection Code. Chair, I would also like to mention that probably it's important that these applications are processed by the GCAC very vigorously and recommended to the ELS. Dorcas, can you come in then give the members the details? Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, EM. Good morning, Chairperson, members and colleagues. The submission covers applications for Umoya Wind Farm and Goda Wind Farm for the Electricity Subcommittee to approve their temporary exemptions from complying with Appendix 9 of the Renewable Energy Power Plant Code. So Appendix 9 requirements are the 6-yearly routine tests that these plants are supposed to conduct to ensure they comply with the code. These are some of the common ones that we've been presenting at the ELS, and the ELS is duly delegated as per clause 1.7 of the delegation matrix to approve applications from the industry requiring exemptions from the South African Grid Code. So in terms of their reasons for non-compliances and the remedial actions are actually covered in Table 2. I will not go through them in detail. I will just take the application as read and also the exemption duration that they are requesting. So taking the exemption, the submission as read, I'll move straight to the recommendations that are on page 8, where it is recommended that the Electricity Subcommittee approve the exemption for Umoya Wind Farm until 31 March 2024 and Goda Wind Farm until 31 March 2024, 31 May 2024, sorry. And also to approve the conditions for these exemptions as outlined in paragraph 14.2. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Madam Rapalakani. Members, you've got the submission before us for questions, comments, and also for deliberation, please. Any questions, any comments? And also any issues in terms of deliberation? By show of hands, members. I know we see a lot of these. Perhaps it's quite clear. I see no hands, therefore I assume it's quite clear. With that, members, the recommendations are as indicated on page 8, both the overstamped page 8 as in terms of the green numbering, but also page 8 of the submission. And the recommendations are under paragraph 14, 14.1 and 14.2, and I think they've been read into the record. So with that, members, if we can just by show of hands, if we can indicate if we are actually approving that. Thank you, Mr. Pokula. Thank you, Advocate Setole, Madam Massetti, Mr. Mkhize. Thank you. You've got your decision, Mr. Mkhize, Mr. Mavuso. Mr. Mavuso, the next one. Item 6.
Yes, Chair, it's presented by Dorcas again. But Chair, this one I just want to mention that the reason why this exemption is being needed by Eskom is because they are of the view that they cannot do the transmission development plan without the inputs from the RIP, and that's the reason why they are asking for this exemption. But Dorcas will take us through the submission. Thanks.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Okay, thank you. So the purpose of this submission is to request the Electricity Subcommittee to approve a temporary exemption for Eskom transmission from complying with clause 7.4 of the Transmission Network Code. Again, the ELS is duly delegated as per clause 1.7 of the delegation matrix to approve applications from the industry requiring exemptions to the South African Grid Code. Eskom Transmission is requesting to be exempted from the requirement to publish a transmission development plan by the end of October. If I can just indicate that Section 7 of the Transmission Network Code specifies the criteria and procedure to be applied by the National Transmission Company in the planning and development of the transmission system. And particularly clause 7.4 states that the NTC shall annually publish a minimum 5-year ahead transmission system development plan by end of October, indicating the major capital investments planned but not necessarily approved. So Eskom requests to be exempted from this requirement this year because it awaits critical inputs from the IRP, which is currently under revision by the DMRE, and Eskom will need inputs from this revised IRP to complete the TDP. Again, I think for this one, we'll take the submission as read and move to the recommendations on page 6. It is recommended that the ELS approve the temporary exemption for Eskom transmission from complying with clause 7.4 of the Transmission Network Code until October 2024, as outlined in Table 2. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Madam. Members, you've got the submission before us. Any questions, comments, and maybe any deliberations from yourselves? By show of hands. Yes, it's quite clear. But maybe, Mr. Mavuso, Tim, can you just indicate, is the expectation that the IRP would be complete? Because if the exemption is only until the 31st of October next year, is therefore the expectation that the IRP would be complete by then?
Okay, yes. So in terms of...
Okay, can I start, Dorcas? Chair, last week we had the first engagement with the department, and from where I'm sitting, Chair, I really cannot see it like the process being completed before this exemption date that they are looking for. But maybe Dorcas probably has a different perspective. But from what I saw last week in the engagements with the department, I don't think it will be done by this time they are asking for. Thanks.
Mr. Rakalakani?
Yeah, okay. So in terms of what had been indicated by Eskom, they seem to be expecting it to be complete by the end of the third quarter or fourth quarter. But as Mr. Mavuso has said, that there is a risk that it might not be finalized by then. So that is something that we are unable to confirm at the moment. But I guess in terms of what had been indicated to them is that latest in first quarter next year, it will be available. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, I was just asking, just in case you probably might be thinking it might be worth our while to maybe, although what was applied for was the 31st of October, to maybe just change that to a later date. But I'll leave that to you, members. It wasn't, it's just a thought that came through. But so I don't know, members, any comments on that? Any possibilities? Or should we just leave it on the date that was applied for? Because we're supposed to be responding to applications and not applying for licensees. I see no hands, but okay, maybe then let's just leave it at the date that was applied for. The recommendations, members, are on page 6 of 6. If by show of hands, members, we can approve those recommendations. Thank you, Mr. Mkiza, Mr. Pokula, Advocate Sithole, Madam Massetti. Thank you. Mr. Mavuso, you've got your decision. If we can then speedily move to agenda item number 7, Mr. Mavuso. Okay.
Oh, thanks, Chair. These two ones that are following will be presented by Matome. And all that I can say, Chair, from my side is that this scheme that is in front of us is the one that is designed to encourage the better service and quality service to the customers. And we do use, in terms of gauging the performance, 3 indices that we use, which is SAIDI, SAIFI, and then HSLI. And then can Matome come in and then present the submission? Thanks.
Mr. Cooper.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mavuso. Good morning, Chairperson and members, and also colleagues. The purpose of the submission is for the ELS Committee to recommend to the Energy Regulator to approve the performance review of Eskom distribution on its service quality incentives results for year 3 of the MYPD4. The committee is duly delegated to make recommendations to ER on matters pertaining to MYPD and RCA. The Eskom distribution SQI is measured in 3 weightings, as Mr. Mavuso has mentioned: SAIFI, SAIDI, and also the HSLI. And the value that has been set on the scheme is 1% of the allowed revenue requirements for Eskom distribution during the MYPD decisions. And the target settings are done on the annexure, which is Appendix A, which is the design of the Eskom distribution quality incentives. And also the target settings are based on the statistics analysis of the 10 years moving performance data. And with that, I would like to take the members to the recommendations, which are on page 7 of 16, which is the first one is to approve the Eskom distribution SQI scheme, and also to approve the amount or the penalty that is shown on paragraph 14B. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. By the way, before I open it to members, are you sure it's MYPD4, not MYPD5?
Yes, it's MYPD4.
All right. Members, it's open for discussion. Questions? Any questions? By a show of hands? Comments? Deliberations? Mr. Mkiza?
Thank you, Chairperson, and thanks to the presenter. Just in general, I think my question applies to both these quality incentives. To say that in the midst of very high levels of load shedding, how do you reconcile this with how do you reconcile load shedding with these incentives? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mkiza. Mr. Pokula?
Thank you, Chairperson. I think for me, we just need to sort out a few things around this. For instance, on page, I think it's page 4 of 7, under SciFi, we are still referring to SciD. Then we are referencing table 4 when we're supposed to be referencing table 5. And sorry, my screen is frozen now for the other ones, but we just need to sort out those two. And the other one, the calculation of that incentive based on the slope, I think it would be useful to have that for us to also confirm that it's been correctly calculated. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Pokula. Any other questions, members? If not, can I hand it back to you, Mr. Mavuso? Team?
Okay, thanks. Sorry. Okay, so we can go. Okay, if I can come in to answer Mr. Mkhize on page 15 of 16, which is the design of the incentive scheme, we've actually indicated all the events which are excluded. And such also applies to load shedding as well. To say that if we have to check the performance of distribution, then generation-based performance should not affect them. So what we've done is that they should be reported separately on that. And for Mr. Bukula, we take the guidance. I will just go through the numbering of the tables. I'm not sure which table has been referred to that has been incorrectly referenced, but I'll just check it. And the calculation of the slope, it has been verified.
May I help, Chairperson? Because I've just indicated which table is correctly referenced. It's referred to table 4 and it should be table 5. And in the other part, it's supposed to be SciFi, not SciD, on the part around SciD in page 4. Okay. And then the last part is the calculation. Show the calculation of how you got to the 69.05 in the slope. I mean, I can't understand why it's just determined without it being shown on the submission.
Okay, it's noted. When the documents is taken to ER, it will be fully put in on the calculations as well, and also the referencing of the table. Thanks.
Mr. Kopa, can I just get a clarification of your response to Mr. Mkhize? When you say certain things are actually excluded, are you saying that despite load shedding, as long as a particular is that as long as those parameters as calculated are actually positive, that we're supposed to then recognize that as an incentive, despite the fact that there may be load shedding? But before you answer, Mr. Mkhize has got a follow-up.
Yeah, my follow-up is that I understand the issue of exclusions. That is on under 5.2, where it's indicated. But I'm saying, and you are saying that these are being taken care elsewhere. And my question is where? And if there's anything that you are doing going forward, because really it's kind of baffling, so to say, if we've got a positive, let's say, if we're to give an incentive in the midst of load shedding. What I'm saying is that maybe is to say what is being done at least around that issue. Just want to understand. It's because it creates a how can I say, it's some level of confusion if one were to use that word, for lack of a better word. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mkhize. Mr. Pokolo.
Thank you, Chair. I'm adding to the discussion that Mr. Mkhize is raising, but if I may. You know, I think we have a vertically integrated system that has a generation part of it that's performing badly, and the transmission part of it that's good, and the distribution part of it that's average or moderate. And these service quality incentives, when they were put in to look at the different parts of that. So if there's a part where we need to penalize and all of that, it is the generation part. And when the distribution part is working fine, the system average interruption duration index says that it talks about the availability of your distribution system. It doesn't talk about the availability of your power. And I mean, if we were to change that, we would be changing the rules. But I'm not saying that what Mr. Mkhize is saying we must look at is not something we must look at, but maybe we must look at it in the other service quality incentives for generation, not for distribution. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Pokula, for the clarification. I hope, Mr. Mkhize, you are covered.
I'm covered, Chair. It's just that then the team must then put effort in terms of looking at that aspect, because it's like we are being given an impression that these are excluded, but they're being taken care of elsewhere. And that is where the challenge for me is. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess also from the customer point of view, for the customer, if they don't have power, whether it's the generation that's not performing or transmission or distribution, if I'm sitting as a distribution customer, I just see I have no power. So it does have so we do need to actually deal with that because that, unfortunately, it's where the rubber meets the ground. We just basically need to be able to sufficiently answer that to people out there. Madam Massetti.
Person, would it not be useful, at least for clarity, if we, as part of background, even if it's just 2 lines or just a paragraph, to indicate exactly what Mr. Pukula has stated, because it is also my understanding that we do have these performance standards for the 3 functional units. So is it not better then in this that we add that these what we call these incentives and their performance standards, there are performance standards that are specifically for generation and those that are for transmission as well as for distribution. And then we say, for purposes of this submission, the one that is analyzed here, it goes to the transmission. So that, I think it will probably also just clarify to people that it has nothing to do with the generation and the performance of the generation. So maybe as part of enhancement and clarification upfront. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Copper. I think the members have guided in terms of how we can enhance, as we've indicated, to enhance this before this matter goes before ER. If we can so enhance, so the decision will have to take into account the proposed enhancements by members. Would that be fine, Mr. Copper? Covered with that?
I'm covered, Mr. Gumete.
All right, thank you. So, members, the decision that you sought is on page 7. Page 7, the overstamp page 7, or page 7 of the submission. It's been read onto the record. If by members, by show of hands, can we, with the enhancements that have been proposed, can we then vote on those recommendations, please? Thank you, Madam Massetti, Mr. Pokula, Mr. Mkhize. Advocate Setole. Thank you, Advocate. Mr. Mavuso, you've got your decision. I guess the same would then apply to the next item, Mr. Copper, but can I hand over to you?
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. The same does apply to the next item, which is the technical performance monitoring of ESCOM transmission. And just to state upfront, this is only performance that is based on the transmission network performances. And weightings are looking at the system minutes, the number of major incidents, and also the line faults per 100 kilometers. And the value scheme is also set at 1% of the allowed revenue for ESCOM transmission only. The performance summary is on table 1, and the recommendations are on page 6 of 16. And the ELS is requested to recommend to the energy regulator to approve the ESCOM transmission SQI design scheme with the design principle and set points for the scheme, and also the amount and the incentives for the ESCOM transmission as shown on paragraph 14 of B. Thanks.
Thank you. Members, any further questions on this? Considering that the concerns and issues were raised in the previous submission would be taken into account as well, and this submission would also be enhanced accordingly. Hopefully those errors, Mr. Copper, that might have been there as well in terms of the referencing of the tables, you are going to correct those as well if they are on this one. Mr. Pokula?
Thank you, Chair. I don't have questions on this particular submission, but I then would want to request the colleagues that the next time they're setting the incentives, I mean, we don't have to take what is in ESCOM's report. We set our own incentives. I mean, 22 system minutes lost is a number that you don't want to show for a transmission company that's supposed to be capable of holding the system together when there are other independent power producers that would be injecting power onto the grid. So it's not a good standard. So as much as and that part of it really is not affected also by your generation. So I am saying that the standard going forward, I mean, it is too low a standard for a transmission company that is supposed to be taking power from different power producers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Kupukula, for that guidance. So, Mr. Copper, that's guidance. And I guess the issue might be, we know that the issues that have been raised in terms of failure of bid windows, for instance, to connect, whether that's a fault of the transmission network or not, is something that you need to analyze so that at least people that are failing are seeing challenges with connecting to the grid to see that their issues are considered. So the guidance basically from Mr. Pokula is that we need to actually we need to develop our own standards, not necessarily just be driven by ESCOM. That's for the future. But I hope you've noted that, Mr. Copper. The decision members that is sought is on page 6 of 6 in terms of the submission, and it's been read into the record. By show of hands, members, if we can recommend this to ER. Thank you, Mr. Mkiza, Madam Maseti, Mr. Pokula, Advocate Sithole. With those changes, proposed changes or enhancements, Mr. Hopper. Thank you. Let's step off this one. Let's then go to item number 9. Mr. Mavuso?
Thanks, Chair. Chair, this submission will be presented by Mark, but I would just like to say that this is a follow-up to the meetings that we have had led by yourself after we had put through the license application, and we engaged ESCOM, and then they raised a couple of issues. And they were identified, there were issues that were identified in terms of from a legal perspective, and some of them that are ambiguous. I'll just draw the members to 4.6.1 to 4.6.3.3. And then the full coverage of these amendments are covered under Annexure 6. But Mark, I think maybe because Mr. Mkize has already set the scene, to maybe just go zoom into the issues that have been asked in terms of exactly as the chair you said, maybe we will give the chance to discuss this like in the ELS itself, in the discussions. Thanks, Mark.
Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, members, colleagues. Thanks for this opportunity to very quickly go through this submission. I'm going to leave the submission as read. I think Mr. Mavuso has drawn attention to some of the most important changes. Most of the changes were to deal with this kind of limbo period where we're in between ERA and there are amendments, but the amendments have not been promulgated yet. And so as a result, there were elements of the license, in fact, of the license applications even, that seemed to kind of touch on both. And we needed to make it clear that this license is granted in terms of the ERA as it stands, because there are some changes in the amendments that even such, for example, a system operator will then become a licensable activity. So for example, the transmission system operator license as a certificate is changed to transmission system license, but has the functions of system operation as outlined in the license conditions. There were some small typographical errors, but I think the most important change in terms of the actual change in the conditions was the removal of the change of the transmission augmentation elements of the license. Then instead of the transmission company consulting with NERSA on every investment, that there would be a alignment between the transmission development plan, which is done in consultation with the regulator, and according to as instructed by the regulator. And on that one, the transmission development plan can be subjected to a nearer a Section 10 public consultation process, and therefore, but to consult with the regulator on every investment was agreed that did seem a bit onerous, but we insisted that there would be a clause that if the NTCSA if there's an objection received to any of these plans for development, then we can step in and have a public consultation. So it hasn't been relinquished. It's just been made driven by an objection rather than a mandatory condition. And those are the most important ones. As I say, others were just clarifications to ensure that there's no ambiguity between the ERA and the ERA amendment bill. I'll leave it at that, and thank you. I look forward to questions from the members. Thank you.
Thank you. So members, we've got this requested amendment before us for questions and for clarifications. Madam Massetti.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I see that we are not making a reference to, to our powers here, so that we can all understand at what point of this, process, or what powers do we have in terms of processing this request. You will recall that once we have made a decision, we cannot revisit that decision. But we do have other provisions of the law. For instance, in this case, if this fits to that, by the way, in this case, I am not sure whether the matter that is before us, it is brought to us under Section 16 of the Electricity Regulation Act, where we need to, where we can vary or add conditions of license at the behest of the licensee in terms of Section 16. Is that what we are looking at here? So how do we establish jurisdiction in terms of the matter that is before us? That is the first question, whether it's in terms of Section 16. This is so that this is because the stage where we have taken a decision and we would have consulted before the final decision with the applicant to check with the applicant whether the proposed conditions of license will suit the applicant. So if we have passed that stage, since this decision was taken in July, now we're sitting in October, I am not sure if we are still within that period where we check the proposed conditions of license with the applicant. It seems to me that we have already passed that stage, and therefore what other legal provision that we can then invoke for us to be able to establish jurisdiction here. And it will appear to me that we only have section 16. And therefore, if that's the case, can that be clarified that indeed we are proceeding with this application before us on the basis of section 16? Now, coming to the actual amendments, Chairperson, I would like to get clarification here, because a bill is a bill. We don't know when that bill will actually be promulgated, even to be passed by Parliament first, and then it will still need to go to the President to look into it. We don't know even at that stage whether there are constitutional issues that can be raised when the bill is now before the President to assent to that bill. So we don't know that process. Now I'm asking myself whether when we take decisions, whether we can take decisions based on a bill when we actually have the act currently that empowers us on what kind of decisions we can make. So is it proper now to make decisions with reference to the bill that is still being processed by Parliament? So that's the first thing that we need to clarify. And then that also goes with the language of the law that we are processing. We're processing the application using that the current act, that we need to align with the act. Why should we align with the bill? Unless, of course, the presenter then says that the terminology that is used is not necessarily in the ERA. It is just the terminology that was just used. So it would not be a problem if we then choose the terminology that is in the bill. But I think I will be worried if we now mention the bill itself in the decisions that we are making when it is a bill. And this law has not been repealed by that bill that is still under consideration. So those are my questions, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Massetti. Mr. Mkiza?
Thanks, Chairperson, and thanks to the presenter. I'd like to check this from Mark as to really what sort of, just to clarify, what sort of submission are we dealing with here? Is it, because my understanding is that when I look at the, I think it's paragraph 4.3. Under 4, when we look at the background, is that there was an approval and then a process of then refining the conditions of license. And then when are we through that process? Are we having really an amendment application here in terms of section 16 of the Electricity Regulation Act or not? Just to clarify as to what are we actually dealing with here? Because if we don't have an application for an amendment per se, we could be not dealing with this appropriately. I think to some extent have also been covered by what Madam Massetti has said, and I don't want to repeat that. But please, let us be clear as to what are we dealing with, what sort of empowering provisions are we relying upon to do that, if any that is applicable. Are we correct? Are we having a correction, an enhancement, or really an amendment? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mkiza. Mr. Pokula?
Thank you, Chairperson. I may not go in the line that Mr. Mkiza and Ms. Massetti have gone through, but I think we are going to have to say that we are making a correction for two reasons. One, the Act empowers us to issue a license to operate a transmission facility, not a transmission system or the other things. And I know that in a few of the meetings, I've requested I personally have requested that when we write that we are issuing a license to operate a generation or transmission facility. And I remember I said that on this one. So how it still became a transmission license, I don't know. The second part around this, there are activities like on 5.1, there were many annexures here, but I think this is still the same annexure, but of the one that we are supposed to approve. We're still referring to license activities that we have no powers to refer to, save for the fact that that's what was in the application, and we were like restating what Eskom had said. And I think an elegant way would really be to take those activities that Eskom had requested to be licensed for, and we just list them without giving them names. And the last part is I don't understand. In fact, we shouldn't be putting powers and duties of the regulator in the license conditions of a licensee. They are in the Act. They don't need to be put into that. And the final part is we just need to go through this with a fine-tooth comb. And the reason why we had said that we are approving the draft license conditions, which then enables us now for, in my view, colleagues, to be then finalizing them, is because we had said here the draft license conditions, make your comments, and once you've made your comment, we'll make our decision. So on that part of the license conditions, I think we are well within what our powers are. We've given them an opportunity to comment, and now we are going to make a decision. But on the part of the actual license, I think we have to accept that we are making a correction. And that's my contribution, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Pokula. Advocate Stolen.
Thank you, Chairperson. I may be covered by the members that have spoken before me. However, I just wanted to emphasize the fact that we cannot approve anything based on a bill that is still not finalized into an act. And therefore, then, my input is that this particular application needs to be in line with what is there in the current era. I think Ms. Massetti indicated this. So anything that's still in the draft bill, we cannot use it to consider this submission. I think the second thing as well that I wanted to emphasize is that if you look at paragraph 4.2, the decision that was made by the ER in July, for me, seemed to have been subject to the FTRM engaging with the licensee in terms of having to look at the license conditions. And therefore, then, my interpretation of our decision was that the license was approved subject to those draft conditions being refined with the licensee. Therefore, then, today we are considering the final conditions that needs to be aligned with the current provisions that are in ERA, Chair. So, Chair, that's how I wanted to summarize my input. Thank you.
Thank you, Advocate Itola. Mr. Mkhize, follow-up?
No, Chairperson, I think I just was doing a thumbs up to say that that was also my understanding. That is why I asked the question as to what I'm usually dealing with. So I'm covered. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I allow the team to respond, I just want to clarify. We've had perhaps about 3 or so meetings with the NTCSA since this matter served before ELS. Part of it before we actually went to ER, just to make sure that there's some kind of alignment. So there has been several engagements, so it's not just been one, and this is an output. But Mark will clarify this. This is a submission that came post those engagements, because before we even had the CEO to sign off, to actually sign the license, we actually had to make sure that the wording that was there was acceptable to NTCSA. But I don't know that Mark can clarify in terms of subsequent to that why we still have this. He can explain that. But the other point that I wanted to raise was that if we recall, members, is that at some point during the deliberation, the issue was raised that said some of the things that are being applied for by Eskom were not in terms of this act, but they were being applied for. And as Mr. Pukula is indicating, they should have just been listed. We should have found an elegant way of just listing them as being applied for, but we'd have no powers over them. It was so indicated. But the members did also guide that we cannot just, as these things were being evaluated, the team needed to take into account the changes that were coming. We were not going to be able to just act blindly as if we were not aware of those changes. Not to say that the decision would have been made based on the bill, but taking into account the fact that we can see the changes that are coming before us. So, but anyway, I'd like to hand over back to the team to respond, but with those guidance. But maybe even the team can then clarify and correct me if I'm wrong as well. Over to you, Mr. Mavuso and Mr. Bear.
Thank you. I must be honest, I'm a little bit confused. So in order to clarify my confusion, maybe if I can say what I believe the outcome of this discussion has been, because there's a very common thread through this discussion about whether this is an amendment or not. So maybe if I can just say, my understanding of the advice that's been given is that this is not an amendment. It is simply a continuation of that refinement process, and that the license should be framed as a license to operate a transmission system if one directly lifts that out of the Act. And that's my conclusion of the advice that I've heard. But secondly, I think I'd like to just say, Ms. Massetti, you're absolutely correct. And the decisions made here were not made in line with the bill. They were just made cognizant of the bill. So, for example, when the license was called a license for a transmission system operator, that language is used in the bill, and therefore there's no decision to issue this license with any change in powers and duties, just the title of the license. But I then, listening to Mr. Bakula, saying, well, let's just call it a license to operate a transmission system. And I think that deals with this in unpacking this ambiguity and resolving it. So I don't have any other specific comments to make, because, as I say, the most common theme for me was this idea of, is this amendment or is this simply a continuation of that refinement process? And if that's been misunderstood and resulted in a submission that shouldn't have been a submission, my apologies for that. But I had just, because the original license had gone out, as mentioned in the submission, I had worked off the delegation matrix that this required a submission for an amendment. But then, Chair, I'm not quite sure. Does that mean, if that's the advice, is this submission then withdrawn and we just carry on and finalize it, and the CEO signs off the new certificate, and then it's done like that? Or I'm not quite sure what the way forward is from this. If I could get some advice, maybe from RSU. Thank you.
LS, could you maybe advise in terms of Section 16? Mr. Pukula?
Chairperson, the Advocate Sithole has indicated that when the regulator approved what needs to be done, it approved that we're approving subject to a number of issues being clarified. So what this submission is doing, it's clarifying those things that needed to be clarified, and is also coming back with the comments from the licensee for the draft license conditions, which still need then to be approved by the regulator. So in the part around the license, what's being issued, that one has been clarified. We're issuing a license to operate a transmission facility. not system, not this transmission facility, as the Act says we must do. And then the other parts around the license conditions, that's what needs to still be approved, because we had said we are approving the draft one condition. So this submission, in my view, is in the subcommittee rightfully and correctly so. Thank you.
If I may ask, Mr. Pokola, would you therefore say we still need to go back? Because if it was a draft and now have a final, do we therefore need to recommend to ER for the sign off?
My understanding, Mr. Gumede, would be that because the ER only approved the draft license conditions that were still going to be commented on by the licensee.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Pokola. I think with that clarity, Mark, I'm hoping it's quite clear. Therefore, it's not an amendment, but it's basically we're now going back. We have to recommend back to ER to then approve the final license with these conditions, having clarified and made all the corrections that have been discussed with the licensee or with the applicant. Is that clear enough?
Yes, thanks. No, that's very clear. I fully understand now where, and it actually resolves my confusion as well. Thank you very much.
All right. Would you care to rephrase for me how you would rephrase the recommendation then?
Yes, sure. Let me just find that in the item, because I've gone right through the document to get to where the changes were. Just give me 1 second to go back to the.
Anyway, the whole point is that what we are saying is that it's requested that the electricity subcommittee recommends to ER to approve to approve the final license the final license that is issued to the NTCSA and issued the certificate with the final license conditions that have been discussed.
Yeah.
With the licensee. With that, members, can we then by show of hands approve that? So we are then recommending to ER to then issue the final license. Members, by show of hands. Thank you, Mr. Mkhize. Thank you, Mr. Pokola. Thanks to Advocate Madam Massetti. Thank you, Madam Massetti. All right, Mr. Mavuso, you've got your decision. If we can step off this item and go to item 10, please.
Thanks, Chair. This one will be. Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, this one will be presented by Elvis. Chair, this submission is as a result of what happened early this year when the 100 megawatts threshold was removed, and we are presenting here to the ELS for approval to revise the registration procedure, and then Elvis will take us through this. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Mavuso, and good morning to you, Chairperson, members, management, and colleagues. This is a revision of the registration procedure to align with the licensing exemption and registration notice of 17 January 2023. The purpose of this submission is to request the Electricity Subcommittee to approve the revised registration procedure and also to approve the posting of the revised registration procedure on the NERSA website. Chairperson, the approval of the procedure is delegated to the Electricity Subcommittee as per paragraph 6.1.4 of the Electricity Delegation Matrix. Chairperson, the difference between the old and the new notice is outlined in table 1 of the submission, where the old notice was allowing generation facilities of up until 200 megawatts to be registered with the energy regulator. Meanwhile, the new notice, it has removed the higher notice, the limit of 100 megawatt. There is no limit anymore. So this is what necessitated the amendment of our current registration procedure. And the difference between the old and the proposed registration procedure is outlined in table number 2 of this submission. Chairperson, the members are therefore requested to approve the recommendations on sections 14 of this submission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Matikwane, Mr. Mavuso. Members, you've got the item before you for questioning, comments, advice, deliberation. By show of hands, members. Seems clear enough. Part of this is a governance matter that will be discussed when we talk about the delegation matrix. So, Mr. Mkhize, or are you voting?
I was voting. Thank you.
Oh, all right. So, members, the decision that is sought is on paragraph 14, page 6. By show of hands, members, if we can vote for that. Thank you, Mr. Pukula, Madam Maseti, Advocate Sithole. Mr. Mkhize, you had already voted. Thank you. So, Mr. Mvuso, you've got your decision. If we can step off that one and go to item 11, please.
Chair, these two submissions that are following basically
you are breaking badly now. I don't know what's going on. Here, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now, Chair?
No, it's very poor. Please delegate, and then we can and then sort yourself out, please.
Okay, Mike, can I take over?
You will take over?
Thank you, Chairperson. I will be doing the submission.
All right, thanks. Please proceed.
This is an application for tariff reduction and amendment of the power purchase agreement by Core Energy, RF Pty Ltd. The purpose of this submission is to request the Electricity Subcommittee to approve the tariff reduction for Core Energy and also approve the amendment of the power purchase agreement to reflect the amended tariff. Core Energy was licensed on 26 April 2012 under bid window 1. The high tariffs for bid window 1 to 3.5 created a perception that the tariff were overpriced and the country was locked in a 20-year PPA. Since the initiation of the refinancing protocol in 2020, 22 IPPs applied for tariff reductions and were granted approval by the energy regulator. The consideration of the amendment of the existing PPA is delegated to the Electricity Subcommittee as per clause 1.12 of the delegation matrix. I would like to mention that the financial information in this application is confidential. I therefore request the Electricity Subcommittee to approve the recommendation as set out in page 4 to 5 of the submission. Thank you, Chair.
Members, any questions, comments on the submissions? Or you may want to deliberate, Advocate Sithole.
Chair, mine is just a point of clarity under paragraph 8. The amount stated there, should it not be highlighted in yellow? Unless if I'm mistaken. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. We're talking about the percentage reduction, if I may.
Yes, Chairperson.
All right. Okay, thanks. Any other questions, members? If none, Mr. Mkhonas?
It should be redacted. My apologies, Chairperson.
Okay. All right. So basically what you're saying, no numbers, no percentage reduction, nothing that, okay, no, that's fine. All of that is supposed to be redacted. Okay, thank you. With that, please make that correction on the submission and also on the RFD, if it's not indicated on RFD. That's the decision, members, that is sought. The decision that is sought is on paragraph 14 again, on page 4 of 15, with the numbers that have been redacted there. Can I see by show of hands, members, if we can approve? Thank you, Mr. Mkhize. Thank you, Mr. Pukula, Madam Maseti, and Advocate Sithole. Thank you. You've got your decision. Am I correct that you are going to be making, I'm not sure, Mr. Mavuso, are you back? Firstly, just to hear.
Yes, Chair, can you hear me, Chair?
Yes, now we are clear. Thanks. Please proceed.
Yes. Okay. So that I don't delay, Chair, the meeting, I'll give it to Tamai to present this particular submission. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Mr. Hore.
Thank you. This is an application for tariff reduction and subsequent amendment of the power purchase agreement by Solar Capital Orange. Solar Capital Orange is one of the bid window 4 IPPs. It actually was affected by the COVID as well as delays in building the facility, and it failed to meet the last COD. And according to the PPA, ESCOM could have terminated this PPA, but ESCOM negotiated with the applicant to save the project because the project was already being constructed, though it was not going to be able to meet the last COD. And the applicant was given 2 options to try to save the project, and it chose the second option is on 4.16, where it offered to reduce the tariff so that ESCOM can also gain and penalize the applicant in accordance with the PPA. And because of this, I will just mention 8.1 and 8.2. Those figures actually should be highlighted. They are confidential. You can see that the project cost also increased, and as a result, the increase in the project cost was funded by the shareholders as it should be, and the effect is that the shareholder internal rate of return it took quite a knock. It was reduced there as on 8.2. So the recommendation is on page 6 of 6, where we are requesting the subcommittee to approve the reduction in the commercial energy rates as well as the reduction of the early energy rate. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hore. Members, any questions, comments? Advice? I see no hands. So it's pretty clear. So members, can I then take you to the decision itself? That's what has been read and onto the record. Can I see by show of hands, members, if we can approve that recommendation? Thank you, Mr. Pokula. Mr. Mkize, Madam Maseti, Advocate Sithole. Mr. Mavuso, you've got your decision, sir. We can now move to item number 13. Mr. Mavuso.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, this one will be presented by Tilly, but I would like to draw the members in terms of the table to table 1, which is the allowable revenue decision, and table 2, which is the process that we have followed, and on table 3, which is the matters that have been raised by the members. And the main issues that the members have been raising around prudence assessment. Tilly, can you just take over and then give the members the details of the submission? Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mabuzo, and good morning to the members and colleagues and members of the public. Chairperson, this is the request for the committee to recommend to the energy regulator approval of the RCA balance. Maybe I should also indicate that the figures are confidential until the confidential process has been undertaken and approved. So the balance, as Mr. Mabuza has indicated, is detailed in table 1, and also to approve the reason for decision thereof. But the application, because it's already published, is not confidential. So ESCOM has applied or is requesting for an amount of 23.861 billion in its favor. we have received this application on the 26th of April, and the application went through the public participation process, which started on the 14th of July, where members of the public or stakeholders were requested to submit written comments, and the oral representation was made on the 23rd of August. As Mr. Mabuzo indicated, we had received guidance, and that was captured under Table 3, and the guidance ranged from consideration for the variable and fixed cost contribution, and the prudency on the maintenance cost, and then prudency around the coal pen cost, and also issues around the engagement with ESCOM and OCGT cost, and the compliance with grid code on maintenance cost. So this application, Chairperson, is driven mainly by the primary energy, the expenditure, and the international purchases. Those are the main three drivers of the application. So the application was assessed for prudency on all the costs, including the ones that are applied in favor of the customer. So table 1 details the adjustments and the final decision that NESA is that the committee is recommending to the ER. So if I can take members to table in the submission, which is table 4, under section 12 of the recommendation, the last column is the NESA decision. So under the line item revised return, ESCOM has applied for that amount, and that is the adjustment that was made. And then the last column is the decision that we are recommending. And as I indicated, as you can see, adjustments are made for expenditure, primary energy, and revenue variance. Those are the major 3 items that are driving this submission. Chairperson, I can leave it at that. With your permission, maybe we can allow maybe just 2 or 3 team leaders to provide further details. But if you accept, we can also move into engagement with the submission. Thank you, Chair.
Can the team leaders respond perhaps to questions that may be asked? Would that be acceptable?
That is fine, Chairperson.
All right, thank you. Members, you've got the item before us. Questions, comments? And by the way, Ms. Intageni, can you confirm that all of the adjustments were made and are empowered by the MYPD, by MYPD4? And that we did not venture outside of that, and if we did, that we actually did consult with the applicant.
Confirmed, Chairperson, there are no deviations. All the adjustments are in line with the MYPD4 methodology.
Thank you. Members, any questions? I know this matter has been before us, before we went to a public hearing. Mr. Pokula.
Thank you, Chairperson. I know Mr. Ntaken has said that the reasons that we are given are according to our methodology, but I may differ in a few of these. If I may take you just, for example, to item, what's this page? Page 19 of 96 in the reasons for decision. If we just take 7.1.1, and I'm taking the very first one. We say that the NESA decision was based on ESCOM being fully able to recover its costs. But then there's a point where we say the ERA does not refer to sales. I don't know what we mean by that, and I don't know how does it add value to this reason for that. And when you read all of this, it just misses the point that we would want to adjust the sales on, and this is the part where we have the discretion. The methodology does not dictate how we will adjust those. It says we'll look at it and we will do what we find reasonable. And when you go through most of these, I know that we had these discussions, but I sometimes don't find our way of dealing with it. I mean, we'll take the whole day if I really go into them one by one. So my request is that colleagues, can you look at what is in the methodology, what is within what we can use in our discretion, is like in this one of the sales and all of that. But if we want to go through, I am happy. But like I said, I think it would take us a long time to just go through them one by one. But I'm guided by you, Chairperson.
Mr. Pukula, to the extent that it may change the decision that we're going to recommend to ER, because ER is going to be relying on us. I think whilst we can't discuss the numbers here, I think there may well be merits, Mr. Pukula, of all of the things that we may have picked up. If you would actually send the annotations to the team, either for the team to provide the reasons for not following the methodology to the T, or whatever, why the actual decision that they proposed was proposed in the manner it was proposed. And that can be summarized before we actually go to ER. I think if there is, because I suspect your comments may well affect the decision. And if they do, I think there is merit if those can be shared with the team, and those can be effected, and the changes that can be made can be effected before this matter serves before ER. Considering the fact that we are not actually at this stage going to be publishing the number anyway, because that number can only be done after ER. After ER has made the comment, has basically made the decision. So my suggestion would be, if you can share those with the team, I would really appreciate that. Maybe I can then be copied as well. Those detailed analysis, and any other member who might have gone through the same kind of detailed assessment of the RFD, and if there are particular questions and reference and corrections that can be effected, those can be effected before the matter serves before ER. That would be my guidance, Mr. Pukul.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have a problem with that, but I think if I was the other members, I would probably have a problem when I'm going to see something that's been changed on the basis of one person's input. I just want to take you. Let's go to table 7, for instance. It's on page. What is this page? Page 20 of 90.
Of 96.
96. You see where we get to the decision that the fixed portion of the cost is 6.437. I was trying to really go through the rationale for that percentage, and although I see that it's the 67 and the 32, I couldn't find where it is that it's known as that. I mean, if in primary energy everything is variable according to this table, then I struggle to understand what was the basis of that. As much as I would say that as a rule of thumb, you always say that 80% of the costs in a utility thing are fixed. It's the other 20 that they can do something. But from this, I could not get what was the rationale for the decision by NESA. Not that I'm opposed to it, or I'm just saying I couldn't find it, and maybe it can be explained.
I guess we have got one of two options. We can go through all of your inputs like that, and the team can then provide the answers to that in terms of why they arrived at a particular decision, or at a particular recommendation. Or alternatively, if you send all of those comments through, the team will still need to provide reasons why they actually arrived at a particular recommendation. So when the matter is presented before ER, all of those queries will then be indicated as such, and why we, for instance, that particular ratio was arrived at, and that particular number arrived at. And if it's rational, it is kept. If it's not, then of course there will then be a decision by the ER to then accordingly adjust that number. That would be my proposal, Mr. Poko.
I will provide the input, Mr. Gumede, no problem. But maybe just for my benefit, and maybe the other members know, how is it that in primary energy everything is variable?
Right, that's a direct question. Over to you, Tim.
Yes. Good morning, Chair.
Yes, you can go ahead, Doctor.
Oh, all right. Yes, good morning, Chair. Good morning, members and management and colleagues. So the assumption there was that you would take primary energy as variable because largely it refers to coal costs, which vary with the volumes that are produced. We do note that this is a general assumption that there might be fixed elements within the primary energy cost. But so to simplify the calculation, we just assume that everything is variable. But what I can maybe just do, I can add either a footnote that explains in detail how each item was classified and reasons behind whether it was classified as fixed or variable. Thanks.
I guess the question also in that footnote, we need to indicate what does the MYPD actually say in respect of primary energy that does it, if it provides any guidance at all. If it doesn't, to clearly indicate that it doesn't. Any comments on that, Mr. Dr. Kondela?
So I'm not aware if the MIPD provides guidance in terms of this one. So generally, as Mr. Bugula has alluded to, the MIPD allows NESA to adjust for variances arising out of lower sales, but it doesn't give details in terms of how this should be done. So it allows us to do this adjustment, but it doesn't specify exactly how we should allocate between fixed and variable costs. So it was just an assumption that we made in this regard. So I'll try and provide details around those assumptions. Thanks, Chair.
Chairperson, if I may, you say I struggled with some of the logic, and then I'm not saying that it's wrong, but if I go to expenditure, for instance, all of the expenditure was taken as fixed. And I do want to believe that, excuse me, when there are certain things that cannot be done, for instance, when there's load shedding, there are certain things that we are not going to do. So that portion of that expenditure has to be variable. So as much as we have the discretion, and I'm just saying that in this one, we're too rough about it, and I don't see really the reasoning. But if it is there, and it's just and it's reasonable and it's what an economic regulator can make decisions on. Yes, we can. I didn't get the confidence to accept this, and I know that the number looks fine. That we have 60 or 70, 30, whatever. But I think when we use those rule of thumb, we must be able to justify it with one or two of these matters. I mean, levies and taxes, I don't know how they are. I mean, there's a part of them that's variable, but I think the levy is fixed on. Yeah, but maybe it's my understanding of it, Chairperson, and I will provide my. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pukula, for the guidance. Madam Maseti.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, the question, the issues that are raised by Mr. Pukula, they are very important because when we take these decisions, we even dig deeper into how the team has looked at the fixed cost part as well as the variable cost. in some instances, and I don't know, I can't recall on this specific one, sometimes we don't have 70. We might even have 68% being fixed cost, and then we've got 32% being a variable cost. And then we get to the debate about the recovery of the fixed cost. And then we get into the primary energy cost and all of that. So it's very important that we don't digress at the stage of now, because the regulatory clearing account is when now the utility is really accounting for the money that was allowed. So the accountability and also how it performed against those. So why do we deviate at this stage instead of looking at that particular year, how we looked at those costs and how it performed in line with what we allowed the entity to recover, and also looking at the assumptions that were made at that time. So it is important that we can't now do a different classification, yet at the time of the original decision, this is what we considered. So it's just important. I think it will need some clarity there so that the team can go back also in that particular year, check thoroughly there, even the reasoning. We do have reasons for decision there, and not try now to take certain costs and put them under fixed cost, yet we classified them as variable cost. So that is important, Chairperson. Let's look carefully at this and what we allowed those costs for, what were the assumptions. Now it's time for accountability. And we should be able then to, if we grant, but let's grant with the very clear reasons. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, and thanks for that guidance. I think, Madam Massetti, you've covered, I think, a lot of the issues here. That simple says, colleagues, remember, it's a regulatory clearing account. So there was a decision made. So the question that I've just broadly state to you or posed to you, I think, to Mr. Ntakeni and the team, is whether in this particular case, did we end up classifying this cost differently to how they were classified when the decision was made? So we need to be able to be explicit about that. So we can't have this classification of primary energy being variable here, when in the original decision, part of those was fixed and part was actually variable. So we need to be consistent. So we need to make sure that when we we package this document for ER decision, we are very clear about that when this decision was made during the MYPD4 decision period, these costs were classified in a particular way. Now, the question is, at this stage, when we're dealing with the RCA, to what extent are we keeping to that original classification? I think the request is clear, Mr. Ntakeni, correct?
Yes, Chairperson, is very clear. Maybe if you can allow Dr. Kunjula just to provide just a bit of a response, but we will, when we get the annotation in hand according to the members' guidance.
Yes, he may respond.
Thanks, Chair. So what we did here in terms of the allocation of cost between fixed and variable, we actually took the decision for the specific year and then allocated it on that basis. But the MIPD decision does not necessarily classify the cost items, whether they are fixed or variable. But we are also guided by the cost of supply framework, because when you look at the cost allocation there, so for instance, if you take OPEX, it will be allocated as a basic charge and allocated to all customers, because it's assumed that it doesn't change with the volumes that are produced. And then you take your energy and then allocate it as cents per kilowatt hours, and then because it's assumed that it will increase or decrease based on the amount of electricity consumed. So that's how we are guided in terms of whether we allocate something as fixed or variable. But we will enhance that section, Chair, and provide more details around that. Thanks.
All right, thank you. I guess going forward, the issue of the classification based on facts and evidence should be useful going forward. Classification and functionalization would be useful if we can be able to use not just assumptions, but based on numbers that can be verified. Because I guess the question is, if we are taken to court by anybody, did we make a rational decision? And even those assumptions, if those assumptions that we are making are actually fair assumptions. All right, members, with that, so we are asked to recommend to ER, and members have guided, and there are questions, and Mr. Pokula is going to provide details, and any other members would really request that if there are any questions that you may want the team to actually consider, please, again, just if we can send those annotations to the team so that when the 2-pager is written, all of the questions that have been asked will be responded to in the 2-pager, along the lines of the guidance that has been provided by members. But members, we are asked here to recommend to ER, as has been read into the record, with those enhancements that have been proposed by members. By show of hands, members, can we recommend with those amendments? Thank you, Madam Massetti. Thank you, Advocate Sithole, Mr. Pokula. Mr. Mkhize, comfortable to recommend with those enhancements? Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mkhize. All right, so you've got your decision, but you have a lot of work to do before the ER. So if we can just go through all of those as members have guided, and it's really going to have to be based, it's a regulatory clearing account. It needs to be based on the decision that was made. And of course, to make sure that where the MYPD does provide guidance, that we use that guidance. If it doesn't, you need to justify the assumptions that were made. All right, if we can now step off this one and go to agenda item number 14. Mr. Mavuso.
Thanks, Chair. This one will be presented by, by Bongani. Just to say, Chair, this emanates from the court decision of 20 October 2022, and we have to come to a decision as NESA on this one by end of this month. So we are targeting the ER of, I think 26, if I have the correct date. And I think as everybody knows that the court decision declared the guideline and benchmark method unlawful, invalid, and of no force and in effect. And we have to come up with a methodology, Chair, or approach to consider the 2024-2025 municipal tariffs. I would like also to draw the members just to the opportunities that we have found in terms of enhancement of the cost of supply framework that we had. The one that had only about 3 municipalities complying with. Those opportunities are listed in 4.6, and also table 1 has the comments of the members. But Bongani can take us through and give us the details of the submission. Thanks very much.
Dr. Konjolai, please proceed.
Thanks, Chair. So yes, so the purpose of this submission is to recommend the review of the cost of supply framework, and as Mr. Mavuso has pointed out, that the initial intention was to comply with the court judgment. So in that regard, we have added a new section that will allow us to adjust rates from year to year for municipalities. Because the cost of supply study is only done once every 5 years, or when there are changes to cost structures or customer base. So the indexation of the rates or costs will be done through the same framework, and because previously we relied on the guideline and benchmark, so it will allow us to do that adjustment. But for the purpose of this submission, we also identified a number of areas that we could improve on in terms of the review of the framework. One of the areas is the ring fencing of accounts. We also updated the sales section. We also did an update on the purchases by municipalities, particularly from unlicensed entities, in terms of how do we deal with those costs. We also enhanced the section in terms of the rate of return and the cost plus, because the current framework only referred to the cost plus. So we would then introduce a section that will allow customers to earn a return on their assets if their regulated asset base is up to date. We also enhanced the repairs and maintenance section as well as the OPEX section. But I just wanted to bring to your attention the fact that when the submission was updated, I actually mistakenly forgot to attach the reviewed framework as an annexure as well as the current framework. So that sort of creates difficulties in terms of, because what is actually recommended is the framework itself, but it was not attached. So, Chair, I don't know, I would like to suggest that maybe members provide comments in terms of the RFD, because all the sections that are in the framework are also covered in the RFD. Then what we'll do after this meeting, then we can maybe, after incorporating all the comments from members, then prepare a round robin a submission with the actual reviewed framework so that they can have a view of what is contained in the framework, because that is what is actually recommended for approval, so that we can still be able to adhere to the timelines in terms of the end of October and meet and be able to have a submission for ER, Chair, through you. Thanks.
Thank you. Members, you've got a submission before you for your questions, comments, deliberation. By show of hands, members. Mr. Pokolo.
Thank you, Chairperson. I do want us to locate what this cost of supply framework that we are wanting to approve is. It is a guideline that the municipalities may follow if they so choose, or may not follow if they don't feel that it meets their or fits their circumstances. But let's take the two scenarios. Let's assume that they follow it and they use it. It is still not the answer to what has been put forward by or to the problem that we have is that when we set tariffs, especially for municipalities, we must do it having looked at the costs, and how you establish the cost, you must have had a cost of supply study. And I'm not sure. I mean, we know, and it's been proven that even if we can have it approved by tomorrow, it is not guaranteeing that we would then have municipalities applying or doing their cost of supply studies anyway before they apply. So I think that the pressure that we are putting on ourselves is also undue, in my view, of having a cost of supply so that we can have those guidelines they can use or not use, and I think we're trying to make it easier for ourselves. But once that is done, once we've sent the cost of supply study, are we then expecting that we are going to say that every municipality that applies? I know that this is not. I mean, if you want my comments on this one directly, I'm fine with this cost of supply study and the framework that we've put in. I would be happy to approve whatever the improvements are. But then coming back to what we have to do, now that we have issued this, our expectation is that every municipality, when they apply on the 1st of or for their tariffs that will apply on the 1st of July, that they would have used this cost of supply framework to create or to have a cost of supply study. I may have been long-winded in that, but I hope you do get my question.
It's quite clear, I think. Advocate Sithole.
Chairperson, my question as well is linked to what Mr. Pokula has just indicated in his input, which is, do we have a process or do we have a plan in terms of what are we going to do with those municipalities that would be submitting their tariff application without a cost of supply? I'm asking this with the High Court decision in mind, Chairperson, that did not support our guidelines and benchmark methodology. Do we have a plan in place as to how we're going to deal with those MUNICs that may not have done their cost of supply prior to their tariff applications? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Advocate Sito. On this one, members, I did try to get an audience with the team before this matter came before here, so that I could also assist in terms of how we progress. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. I think just so that members make a correct decision, I do want to frame some of the questions on this, so that members at least and some of the questions that I might have in my head, they also talk to the primary problem or the primary issue raised by Mr. Pukula. Because at the end of the day, what we are trying to do is to say, ideally by the 15th of March next year, that we would have come up with a process of either setting or approving, or would have approved or set tariffs for each of the municipality. And for me, what was not clear was, in respect of what sits before us, yes, we may then approve the cost of supply framework, the update. Do we then firstly issue it as a condition of license, so that all municipalities, it becomes a condition of each of the municipality that they need to be to submit their applications based on this? But does it become a must? Now, even if it does become a must, because the whole issue around this is got the cost of supply study has got those 5 steps. The question that for me arises is that, yes, we may have defined what needs to be done, but the question is, how is it going to be done? Who does it? For instance, if we have a municipality that does not have the capacity to collect the cost or to ring-fence the costs that are to deal with electricity, and they've so indicated in the past, how do we make them do that if they just don't have the capacity? Now, for me, the issue is, it's the how. What is missing here is the how, and the who is going to do it. So, for instance, when you're talking about, because the initial step here is clearly about revenue determination, the question that arises, who will be doing this? Or firstly, as NERSA, are we going to be looking at that number? Are we going to be approving it? Or are we just going to get the cost data? And are we going to do the actual calculation ourselves? Or are we expecting the municipality to have gone through this detailed assessment as per the framework in terms of coming up with that revenue requirement or that allowed revenue? And then based on that, we then are going to approve. Is that the intention? Or are we going to get a third party? Or is the expectation that the municipality will employ a third party to do this for them? And the same basically applies to the other 4 steps in terms of functionalization, classification, and allocation. So for me, what's unclear is that what is the decision that we are asked in respect of the problem? Because the problem here is that we need to be able to set the tariffs, or to set or approve the tariffs for municipalities. So what exactly is the decision that is sought? And if it's about the approval of the framework, is it just to get the framework to be a condition of license, in which case it forces those municipalities to then go about and do these things themselves? Or does it force the municipalities to provide the data for us to do this? So that is the challenge. Mr. Pukula, your camera is on, sir. That is the challenge that I'm not quite clear about. How are we solving the problem that sits before us? So if we're going to recommend to ER, what exactly are we recommending to ER in respect of the problem? So for instance, even in terms of the tariffs themselves, Are we still going to use the same base of the tariffs that were there, that were deemed to have been developed without any basis to the cost, the tariffs that were approved this year, and merely look at escalation? Is that what we're going to do? Now, how does that talk to the actual decision of the court? So there are lots of such related questions. I think I've got a detail of them here, but I think for me, I just thought it would be useful that as the team responds, to be able to give members just that guidance. What exactly are they? What are we recommending to ER? Does it answer that fundamental question of us being able to set or approve the tariffs for next year, and to clearly indicate if we have the capacity ourselves to do that, or are we envisaging that can be done or will be done by a third party? And if so, who's going to pay? I know we don't deal with procurement issues here, but we must be able to deal with with our capacity to deliver on this, and even especially within the time. And then answer the question that simply says, what if we can't? What do we do? Because we have a legal obligation to approve those tariffs. Then what? What is it? How do we give comfort to ER that we'll be able to meet our legal obligation with municipal tariffs next year? Over to you, Mr. Mavuso and team.
Yes, Chair. We are busy with a submission, which is a plan in terms of how then we'll implement this program of cost of supply. So we will be bringing that. So previously, when we came to ELS, we did the same. So we had two submissions, one talking to the review and the other talking to the plan, but there were gaps that were identified by members in the actual plan. So we are busy updating the plan, but maybe I can also try and answer some of the questions around how do we then do this. So I don't know if Mr. Advocate Morat is here, but in my previous engagements with him, what he actually pointed out was that when the judgment was issued, because the complainants, when they submitted the matter to the court, they sort of included NESA as well as all the municipalities. So when the judgment was issued, it didn't apply just to NESA, it also applied to all the municipalities as well. So in terms of whether it should be a condition of a license or it should be just a guideline, maybe he can clarify in that regard. So, but what we've done in the last 2 years, we actually developed models that simplify the whole process of doing a cost of supply, because the biggest input into the cost of supply is your deform data as well as your ESCOM purchases. So because ESCOM purchases make up about 75% of municipal costs plus the deform data. So we've actually developed models that can be used to simplify this process, and we've shared it with municipalities. So there are licenses that are capable of doing this themselves. If my numbers are not correct, we're actually sitting close to 50% in terms of cost of supply studies that we've received from municipalities. So, but we've also identified municipalities that are not capable of doing it themselves. And we have, with other partners, such as Sustainable Energy Africa, put a plan in place where they will be assisted to do the cost of supply studies. So it's not a foolproof plan, but we are confident that by March would have reached significant milestones. But those details, Chair, will be provided in the next submission that will be taken to ELS around the plan. But for now, what we are just requesting is for this framework to be updated so that it covers the gap that was identified in terms of the guideline and benchmarks. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. So if I hear you, is that the question of how we're going to set or approve the tariffs, it will come with the plan. But this one is really just the focus is about updating the framework. But the plan is still coming. So that is what we are asking the members to look at, just to approve the updated framework. But the plan in terms of how we're going to deal with the 178 municipalities is still coming. Is that the submission, Dr. Konjura?
Yes, Chair.
All right. So members, that is the clarity provided. I'm not sure if there are any follow-ups. If none, I guess it's quite clear what this particular submission is about. Yes, I see a follow-up from Mr. Pokula.
Thank you, Chair. As I indicated in my initial input, is that this plan, I mean, for me and the energy regulator, I think we shouldn't put a lot of focus in it. And as I indicated, that I would happily approve it. But the point about it is that once we have approved it, I mean, we should do things with an end in mind. Once we have approved it, and let's say 100% of the municipalities even give us their cost of supply, what we don't have is how are we then going to determine the tariffs once we've received the cost of supply studies? That's what we don't have. Maybe if it's going to come with the plan, then yeah, I'll wait for the plan to come.
Thank you, Mr. Pokula. Do you care to respond, Dr. Konjela?
I'm not sure, because my understanding the cost of supply would also include the rate setting part. So then, so for instance, if a licensee does a cost of supply using 22, 23 data, then they will also include in that a study the rates that will be applicable in the next applicable financial year. So once we've issued an index for licenses, then to apply for next year, then they will submit a cost of supply study along with the applicable rates for the next financial year based on the cost of supply study. So that is my understanding, Chair.
All right. Mr. Pokula, do you want to have a quick follow-up before I recognize Mr. Mkhize? Mr. Mkhize?
No, I'm fine, Chair. I'm fine, Chair. I think I will wait for the plan.
Okay. Mr. Mkhize?
Thanks. I think just related to what Mr. Pokula said, I think it's also going to be important to outline the issue of capacity to then be able to attend to this course of supply studies, do the analysis and finalize on time, in view of some of the comments also that came through during the public engagement on this matter, because we also need to look at it not necessarily in isolation. We need to look at it in considering all the other activities that are going on in the electricity regulation space. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mkhize. By the way, I thought I would get a comment from LAS on some of this. Because I mean, one question that's quite not clear. I'm hearing you, Dr. Konjela, talking about indexing. Indexing, I would assume that's the percentage increase. Was that not declared illegal by the judgment? So, are we not going to, because how different is that indexing from the guideline itself? So I'm just, it would be useful to get LAS comment on this, if they are free to comment.
Thanks, Chairperson, and good morning, members and fellow colleagues. Chair, I think without venturing into the semantics of the economics discipline, the language of the judgment was very clear that the departure point of considering the coming tariffs of municipalities should be based on the alignment with the provisions of Section 15 of the Electricity Regulation Act. Secondly, that it should be based on cost of supply. And I think that the issue that you are raising, Chairperson, is that the court was kind of guiding NERSA to desist from using assumptions to say it must be based on something that has been evaluated against what the municipality will be applying. So if the issue that the good doctor is raising goes back to the same principles that were anchored in the guideline of assumptions, then we will be falling foul to the provisions and of the court order and the language of Section 15. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Marati. Mr. Pokola?
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I think it's on page 15 of the submission that we're looking at, and it's the figure 1, it's the cost of supply process. So what we are telling municipalities takes them to the last part, which is cost allocation. The next thing that they are going to do is the rate design. So Dr. Konjalwayo indicated that what is expected is that the municipality will do all of this and give us those rate designs, and as far as I understand, and that's what I'm saying, that it is not going to happen. It is impossible for most of the municipalities, but he has said he has the confidence, and I have no reason to doubt his confidence in what he understands about municipalities. So my understanding then is that from when we have approved what we are approving, then municipalities will do all of that and then get to the cost allocation part and then design their rates. So what they would be sending to us are the rates that they would have approved according to those cost of supply studies. And if that is what is being said, yes, then we will. I think we can await for the applications by the municipalities, which is that last part, the rates design, because that's what we are going to approve. We're not going to approve. We'll look at their cost of supply studies, but we'll approve those rates that they would have designed according to their cost of supply studies.
Thank you, Mr. Pokola. Thank you, Mr. Pokola. I'm assuming, Dr. Konjela, you are in full agreement with that analysis, because at least that's what the document alludes to. And therefore, the question would that be, for instance, even the question of capacity for us to do this. But we still need to have addressed the issue that's been raised by Advocate Sithole. What about those municipalities that won't be able to do this? How then do we do this? How then do we proceed? But I assume that the plan, as you say, the plan is still coming, that the plan will then address all of these issues. If you care to comment, Dr. Konjela. Oh, before you do, Madam Massetti's hand is up. Madam Massetti.
Thank you, Chairperson. I guess I'm still on the issue that is raised by Mr. Pokola. I just want to understand whether this framework is going to be a mechanism that we are going to use to scrutinize and verify these cost of supply studies, so that we can be able to differ where we differ, with the cost that are stipulated therein, rather than to expect a municipality to bring their cost of supply and you simply approve the cost of supply as is. So is this framework now going to be sort of a methodology that we use, a systematic methodology that we use for each and every municipality that now brings an application, and then we look at the application, we see that it fits to the principles of this framework, and then does it tell us that now we are going to use this framework as some sort of a methodology or guideline of some sort now to look into those applications when they are before us, and where we agree with them, we agree, where we say, no, on this part, we don't think that this is efficient or prudent, and therefore this is the verification mechanism that we used in terms of the methodology or whatever we are going to use. So this framework is going to be a methodology of some sort that we use as a tool, as an instrument to approve. I guess that's what I would like to check, if this now is final. And maybe we can even test that then when we bring the plan, so that we do a dummy example and then see what is expected from a pragmatic point of view when we start receiving those things, to just test our own proposal here, how it's going to work in practice. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Massetti. Dr. Konjela, if you can respond to those observations and questions, maybe even indicate in terms of the timeline, when exactly are we expecting the plan? And then if we can just maybe just have some idea of how we're going to deal with the question asked by advocates at all.
Yes, Chair. So I think the biggest issue is the issue of capacity, and I've raised it so many times with management. Maybe they can also come in and just maybe allude to what they are doing, because I've raised it so many times. So they it's quite correct. We don't have capacity to analyze all these studies and comply with the court judgment by 2024-25. But so in terms of what Mr. Pugula referred to, yes, that's quite correct. So they will submit the study along with the rates. So, but we actually approve the rates. We don't really approve the study per se. So, and then to respond to Ms. Maseti's question around, so yes, it's quite correct. So this framework also talks to the issue of prudency and efficiency, to say when we receive a cost from licenses, so for instance, based on the deform information, how do we then assess those? So in the studies that we have noted and approved tariffs based on those studies, which is about 8 of them, I can maybe bring one of those just to show what we have done. So, but to answer the question, yes, it's a sort of a methodology that talks to how do we, instance, assess operating costs when the licensee brings those. And that's where I think most of the work that we need to do comes in, because that prudency and efficiency assessment is quite time consuming and extensive. And then in terms of the question around those licenses that do not submit their supply studies, so I don't have an answer to that one. But when Mr. Advocate Murati, when we had a meeting with him, he did allude to the fact that licenses are also bound by this court judgment. But what we are doing internally, we are actually developing, we actually have a model that will allow us to draw data from the cost of supply studies that would have been approved, and then maybe use some sort of, if I may call it, benchmark of costs, not tariffs, that you can then use to say if a licensee of this size, with this number of customers and this size of NMD, those costs should be sitting within a certain range in terms of the costs. So because cost benchmarking is one of the most effective ways of regulation, which is accepted out there. So this one, the difference is that this would be a cost benchmark, not a tariff benchmark. So that the difference is that the tariff benchmark will take consumption levels and then say based on those consumption levels, you should be charging this tariff. But cost benchmark is based on the actual costs that a licensee would have incurred in providing a service. So I think I will stop there, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Konjula. I guess the detail of all of what you've said will come with the plan. Perhaps just before we recommend this before I put it to members, whether we can recommend this to ER, but whatever we're recommending, is it going to be? Can I just pose a question to LAS? Will this become a condition of license of all of the municipalities, or how are we going to do this? Or is it currently a condition of license? Maybe can I put it that way? Mr. Murati? Or are we going to issue it as a rule? Dr. Murati, if you can unmute yourself, sir, maybe we can guide. So we can then include it in whatever that we are recommending to ER. We basically need to be quite clear what we are recommending to ER. Murati? Okay. I see you might be struggling to unmute, Mr. Murati. I was hoping members that will actually, as I put this through to you for a decision, I was hoping that would be clear what we are recommending to ER. That is this framework, and are we just approving the framework as an internal document, or approving it as a condition of license, or are we going to put it out as a rule? So that at least the question is, how binding would this framework be on the licensees? Mr. Pukula,
Chairperson, my guidance is that in fact, the way that it was used, this cost of supply study, if you look at the electricity pricing policy and what it says that a cost of supply study must be done. It does not put the onus on the regulator to have a framework of how this is going to be done. But because municipalities don't have the capacity to do this, and most of them, including the ones that act like they have, the initial cost of supply study or framework was there to guide them to simplify matters as so as to meet the requirements of the law. So even in this one, my view is that it's a guideline. They can use it if they want to use it, but if they have a more sophisticated one, like the one that has been proposed by GIZ and the others, they should use that. All that we need to show is that the tariffs were applied for based on a cost of supply study that was conducted, which is what the court really requires us to do. And as it's been said, in many of those in the workshops, there are different ways of doing this. It depends on the assumptions you are going to make, and you'll have different results in all of them. So it's just a framework. So for us, strategic point is to have it as a guideline. They can use it or lose it. Thank you, Chair. Okay. I saw Stindila's hand came up, but that is the proposal, members. Is it something that we can? So we'll recommend to ER. I'm going to put it to you that we then recommend this to ER, but it's a guideline, so they can use it, or they can use something better, as long as when they make their submissions of the rates that they're applying for, that those rates are actually based on the costs of supply. Members, can we then make a decision on that? Can we vote on that by show of hands? Mr. Pokula, Advocate Sithole, Madam Massetti, Mr. Mkhize. Mr. Mavuso, you've got your decision, but I think, as indicated in the main, the devil is in the detail. It's the plan. Because it will be a guideline. So, in fact, it still doesn't answer the question of whether we're going to be able to respond to the problem at hand in terms of how we determine municipal tariffs for next year. So that we're going to rely on the plan. Perhaps we may need to indicate at some point when exactly do we expect to get that plan, and will it be on time for us to be able to communicate that plan to the municipalities, for us to be able to make the decisions that we need to make. Hopefully not as late as June, which is what we've done. We've been doing all of these years, targeting the 15th of March, which is what is in the law. So we'll be expecting some kind of an answer to that. So it becomes a matter arising, Mr. Mavuso. We need to understand when the plan will serve before this committee and before ER, to make sure that it addresses all of the issues that have been raised by members. All right, if we can step off this issue. Mr. Pokula? Sorry, Chair, I don't mean to speak after I've spoken, but I think the point I want to put forward is that when we get this plan, I think if colleagues are going to be able to show that the 15th of March is a condition for ESCOM and the tabling of that. And by that time, it is only then that the municipalities will start their consultation or will finalize their consultations for the tariffs. So I in the plan, if it could really show how this is going to happen, and most importantly, have what Advocate Sithole has said, that there are municipalities that are not going to have it, despite Dr. Kundolwaye's confidence in them. And what is it that we are going to do after that? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. By the way, we are kind of hoping, and we're trying to push to see whether we can't get ESCOM to get their ERSA approval done before the end of this year. Because, in fact, the 15th of March also applies to municipalities in terms of the MFMA. We've never met it, but because that's when, before the municipalities start their budgets, they need to actually have a decision in terms of in theory need to have a decision on the tariffs that they're going to be charging for the services they are providing. But so if we can have the 15th as a target, that should be the first prize. All right, so if we can step off this one and go to item number 15, please. Mr. Mavuso?
Chair. Yes, Chair, this one will be presented, which is the Samanco, will be presented by Buyiso, and then the following one by Gwen. Thanks, Chair.
Ms. Babinya?
Thank you, Mr. Mavuso. Good morning, Chairperson, members, and colleagues. We've received an application from Eskom for a 6-year NPA for each of the 6 Samanco ferrochrome smelter operations. This is in line with the long-term framework. The incentive price covers the variable cost and contributes to the fixed costs to serve these smelters. If the NPA then is not approved, the rest of the customer base must still be liable and carry the fixed costs that do not go away whether these smelters operate or not. What this really means, Chairperson, is that the benefit to the rest of the customer base will worsen off without the smelters operating, as the fixed cost still needs to be covered. And during demand challenges, Eskom will interrupt supply to each smelter, and this will help with reducing the level of load shedding. The period of 6 years is an optimal balance of providing the smelters with certainty and limiting uncertainty and risks for both Eskom as well as the electricity supply industry costs going forward. Eskom will be requested to submit 6 monthly progress report so that NERSA is able to monitor the implementation of this agreement. I would like to mention, Chairperson, that the figures in the submission are confidential. It is therefore recommended that the Electricity Subcommittee recommends to the Energy Regulator the approval of the decision and RFD for this 6-year NPA for each of the 6 Samanco smelters. Also to recommend to ER approval of sharing of the decision and RFD with Eskom, as well as recommending approval to publish the decision and the RFD. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Madam Mabinya. Members, any questions, comments? By show of hands. If none, I guess we've had an engagement on this extensive in terms of the public hearing. Okay, there is a question by Advocate Sithole. Over to you, ma'am.
Chair, it's not a question, just for enhancements purposes. We may need to have the document going through language editing. And there's paragraphs that have the same title. I think paragraph 3 and 4. I'm just trying to get to the RFD and the exact page. I think I marked page 17. We're talking about the applicant, and I don't know, I thought the applicant was one and the same, so I'm not sure why we repeated it twice. So if that can be sort of looked into. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Pokola?
Chairperson, there's a couple of issues that we just need to do with these NPAs. I'm not opposed to approving them, but if you look at the electricity pricing policy, in particular 14, and I think you can go through those EOF and that, there's a part that requires us to show that these NPAs are based on a cost of supply study or cost of supply on the discounted cash flows, and I think we must append those, or Eskom must have done those as part of our decision. And the second part around, I think the DMRE has issued the things that are required, which fulfills this. But the second part of the Electricity Regulation Act is we then need to show that part of the act. I just want to find it and read it as it says that a licensee may not discriminate between customers or classes of customers regarding access tariffs and conditions of service, except for objectively justifiable and identifiable differences approved by the regulator. And those are the other things that we must prove, not the part around that the cost will still be carried by the other customers. That's not the test that we need to apply on this to discriminate in as far as the pricing is concerned. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any further comments, guidance? Ms. Maminya? Yes.
Chair, apologies. I think my comment relates to the next submission. I was just trying to make a note in the chat. Apologies for my comment in this one. On this one, it's in the next submission.
No, that's fine. No, that's fine, Madam. We'll then actually have to take it. We'll include it in the next submission. Thank you. And basically enhancements, Ms. Maminya. I mean, I think that's what this one is about. You need to have to append those costs. We need to have a clear understanding of that. The NPAs must show that these customers do pay for the cost to serve them, and analysis that would have been done by Eskom. Just please append that, and then of course the issue around discrimination. You need to have that as a test, and if you can maybe respond to that, if you so chose, but also just to actually enhance the submissions to show that it actually meets that discrimination test. But over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Chairperson. We will look into the matters that have been raised by the members before submission for ER and ensure that all the issues raised are incorporated. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. So we will then amend the draft RFDs accordingly, and then of course language editing, please. I don't know whether we do that before it goes to ER or we actually, because sometimes the language can actually change the meaning of the sentence. So sometimes it's important that it's done correctly. All right, with those enhancements, members, can I take you to the decision that is sought? It's on page 7 of the submission, and it's paragraph 13. It's been read onto the record by show of hands, members, if we can recommend this to ER. For approval with those enhancements. Thank you, Madam Massetti, Advocate Sithole, Mr. Mkhize, and Mr. Pokula. Ms. Mabenya, you've got your decision. Back to you, Mr. Mavuso, item number 16.
Thanks, Chair. This one will be presented by Gwena, but I'd just like to mention that there's one NPA section here that is not here because there's a dispute between ourselves, the municipality, and Glencoe itself, in terms of supply. So it is something that we have engaged with the municipality, Rustenburg, and we are then waiting for their response. And but Gwena, please, can you take us through the submission?
And the matters before courts. Okay, please go ahead.
Okay, good morning, Chairperson, members and colleagues. Okay, before I present the submission, I will address the issue around the Rustenburg smelter. When we received the application from Eskom, it was the application for 5 smelters, but the 4 smelters were direct customer of Eskom, and the Rustenburg smelter was the direct customer of the Rustenburg municipality. And section 12.2 of the interim framework clearly states that applicants applied by the municipal licensee should submit their application to municipal licensee, and municipal licensee submit to NERSA directly with the DTIC support. The reason the smelter in Rustenburg was not considered is because they didn't submit. There is no application from Rustenburg municipality in support of the NPA, and there is no letter from the DTIC. Yeah, I hope I've addressed it. And the matter is within the courts. On 9 May 2023, we received an application for Eskom for 4 of the 5 Glencoe Merafe Chrome venture from Mpumalanga, Limpopo, and Northwest, and the applications complied in terms of the interim long-term framework. The NPA proposed price will cover the cost of supplying the customer, and NESA will assess this when receiving the monitoring reports. The impact on other customers will be worse off if the smelter close operations, as they will have to contribute to the fixed cost, and an appropriate balance must be obtained in supporting the sector and the impact on other customers. The smelter will provide interruptibility to assist the national system operator in the event of system supply shortage in reducing the extent of load shedding. And with regards to the recommendation, it is recommended that the electricity subcommittee recommends the following to the energy regulator for approval: to approve the decision and the reasons of decision for the 6-year NPA for 4 of the 5 Glencore Merafe Chrome Venture ferrochrome smelter operations in Mpumalanga, Limpopo, and Northwest. Share the reasons for decision with Eskom, and lastly, publish the reasons for decision on the NESA website. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I was kind of hoping that you will recognize the comments and that were raised by members in the previous submission, because they apply to this one too, especially the issues that were raised by Advocate Sithole, because as she's indicated, her comments largely especially on the second part, the second comment relates specifically to this submission. So I was hoping that you will recognize that, so we don't actually repeat the same things again, because they do apply here as well. The issue, for instance, of discrimination as raised by Mr. Pukula applies to this as well as the EPP position in terms of the cost of supply also applies to this one as well. So what I'm just simply saying is that I was hoping you will acknowledge that, but those comments also apply to this submission as well. Members, I'm not sure if there are any additional comments specific to this one, because I think the team will then incorporate the comments that were raised in the previous one. Will incorporate them on this one as well. But any additional comments, members, specific to this one? If none, with the enhancements that were proposed in the previous one, which applies to this one as well, especially the second issues that were raised by Advocate Sithole, which I'm assuming that the team has noted, that those changes will then be effected on this one, those corrections, and those corrections that were identified as being needed, that those will then be incorporated. With that, members, can I take you to the decision? It's on page 6. By a show of hands, members, can we recommend to the ER? Thank you, Mr. Pukula. Thank you, Madam Massetti, Advocate Sithole, Mr. Mkhize. Mr. Mavuso, you've got your decision. We then move to item 15. We are at 11:30, members. We should be able to finish all of these the items that are for the open meeting. I'm really going to ask members if we can just indulge us. Maybe we can target to finish at 12:30. Just request that you plan for, if we can just grant us an additional half an hour so we can go through the whole agenda. But can I then move on to item 17, Mr. Mavuso?
Next, without wasting time, Chair, I'll give it to Chisilo to present this one. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mavuso. Good morning to Chair and the members, management and staff, and the members of the public. Chair, the purpose of this submission is to request the Electricity Subcommittee to note the quarterly progress report on the corrective action plan of the generation compliance audit. Chair, this submission is duly delegated to this committee. Chair, we therefore recommend the recommendations that are set out in section 9 of this submission, page 4 of 13. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, questions, comments, additions, guidance? By show of hands. If none, the decision that is sought, members, is on page 4 of the submission. The ELS is requested to note the quarterly progress report. By show of hands, members, if we can note this report. Thank you, Madam Massetti, Mr. Pokula, Mr. Mkize, Advocate Sithole. Your report is so noted. Can we then move to agenda item number 18? Mr. Mavus?
18, yes, Chair. 18 Cindy will present this one. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Before I start, I would like to correct on page 6 and recommendations 14.2. It should read that the Electricity Subcommittee should approve the posting of the consolidated second quarter instead of first quarter. Chairperson, this is a report on findings of the electricity generation industry compliance audits conducted in the second quarter of the 2023-24 financial year. The purpose of this submission is to request the Electricity Subcommittee to note the report attached as Appendix A and also to approve the posting of the reports on the NESA website after clearing the confidentiality matters with the licensees. The Electricity Subcommittee is delegated to make a decision on this matter as per clause 3.1 of the delegation matrix. 7 licensees were audited as per the audit plan that was approved on the 4th of April 2023, and the licensees are mentioned in table 2 of the submission. I therefore request the Electricity Subcommittee to note the consolidated reports for the second quarter attached as Appendix A and also approve it to be posted on the NESA website after clearing the confidentiality matters with the licensees. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Madam Kwanazi. Members, any questions, comments on the report? By show of hands. If none, the decision that is sought is on paragraph 14 as has been read into the record on page 6, the overstamp page 6. Members, by show of hands, can we note and approve as requested? Mr. Pokula, Madam Massetti, Advocate Sithole, Mr. Mkize. Mr. Mavuso, we've got your decisions. That actually brings us to the end of the items that were for the open part of the meeting. I'd like to thank the members of the public that may have been following us on all our platforms. We did try to, the agenda was a fairly lengthy agenda, but we did try to keep it to time. We are at 11:30, and that brings us to the close of the open meeting. Mr. Mateja, if you can assist us and close.